A peddler staggered into the pavilion this morning, claiming he had crossed 3 mountain ranges just to trade for one fresh tail. But the moment he saw your familiar faces, he quietly admitted ours were worth far more than any treasure in his pack. Sit close while the kettle still sings and the snacks are warm. Those who vanish into jianghu always seem to return right when the most unbelievable stories are about to unfold. That timing alone deserves a cup of tea and a hearty laugh. An old chronicle tucked inside a forgotten scroll records that true fortune favors neither overwhelming power nor dazzling talent, but the heart that never strays from righteousness. Chen Ping'an has just completed a miraculous refinement, earned the trust of sentient Tao characters, and stepped into a peaceful new year surrounded by companions. While far away, Zuo Yu's lone sword has shattered Parasol Leaf Sect's pride and even cut down Du Mao's desperate ascent. Yet as new allies gather, priceless opportunities emerge, and hidden masters reveal themselves one after another. An even greater journey quietly begins. A long breath of true qi poured into the 5-colored golden box cauldron. It circled the inner wall like a blazing dragon, its twisting body leaving a burning trail wherever it passed. In artifact refinement, the amount of true flame decided whether the cauldron could be ignited at all, while the flame's purity decided the final quality of the treasure. Raw strength could open the furnace, but only precise control could produce something worthy of the great Tao. Compared with the water seal, refining the jade slip was far less dangerous. It did not need to take root inside one of Chen Ping'an's acupoints during the process, nor did it demand a mountain of natural treasures and countless varieties of refinement sand. Chen Ping'an had spent a long time studying the pill refinement scripture given to him by Lu Yong. He had also examined the immortal mantra engraved upon the jade slip every day, committing its mysteries to heart. The 2 inheritances were astonishingly thorough. One contained Lu Yong's most valuable experience, while the other embodied the burial river goddess's lifetime of effort. Every step had already been prepared for him: when to inject another breath of true qi, how much sand to cast into the cauldron, which variety to use, and when to recite the mantra that would summon a storm. When the proper moment arrived, rain would descend from the heavens and merge with the flames below, allowing water and fire, 2 opposing forces, to assist the refinement together. This was the value of a complete inheritance. It did not merely hand a cultivator a technique. It preserved the countless failures, insights, and hard-won judgments of those who had walked the path before him. The procedure was exhausting, but it was not especially difficult for someone as patient as Chen Ping'an. Outside the enormous flower bud formed from the sea of clouds, Fan Junmao sat on guard. She was prepared to correct him the moment he took a single wrong step. Yet Chen Ping'an remained so calm that even she was caught off guard. Whenever the refinement entered a quiet interval, he simply closed his eyes and rested, his breathing steady and his mind undisturbed. His composure did not come from arrogance. It came from preparation. Chen Ping'an had studied every instruction until the dangerous unknown had become a sequence of tasks he could complete one by one. He made no serious mistakes. A few tiny errors allowed traces of water essence to escape the cauldron and nourish the surrounding sea of clouds, but the losses were almost negligible. Fan Junmao watched those pitiful wisps vanish into her clouds, feeling more disappointed with every passing moment.
This is your first time refining an innate spirit treasure of this caliber. Why aren't you nervous? Couldn't you make a few more mistakes and feed a little more water essence to my sea of clouds?
It soon became obvious that Chen Ping'an no longer needed supervision. With no chance to profit from his errors, Fan Junmao lay down in frustration and went to sleep. For Fan Junmao, this refinement had become an absurd contest. The steadier Chen Ping'an remained, the less benefit she received. His success was practically robbing her in broad daylight. As she had expected, the entire night passed without incident. By the following morning, most of the refinement was complete. Only the characters once engraved upon the jade slip remained. Those characters had most likely been refined into the jade by its former owner using the same method. They carried traces of the great Tao's true intent and had gradually awakened a faint sentience of their own. Although the jade slip that housed them had already been subdued, the characters themselves still resisted annihilation. Having awakened to existence, they were unwilling to disappear from the world. All sentient things eventually learn to fear death. Yet heaven demanded that life move through birth, decay, and extinction. Cultivation was therefore an act of defiance, the pursuit of a body and spirit capable of enduring beyond the limits imposed by time. A passage of an immortal mantra developing awareness was extraordinarily rare. Fan Junmao sat upright and stared into the cauldron, where more than 1,000 lively green characters whirled like a swarm of emerald fireflies.
Chen Ping'an, try to gather this entire passage. Someday, should you meet a suitable disciple, you could imprint these characters directly upon that person's soul and pass on the immortal mantra. Immortals often transmit their secret arts to direct disciples in this way. That is why their inheritances can pass from one generation to another without endless explanation. Until you give them to someone else, they can remain inside your acupoint and nourish your soul. There are very few methods capable of strengthening the soul without harmful consequences. If you succeed, it will be an enormous blessing.
Chen Ping'an hesitated. He understood the value of Fan Junmao's proposal, but he had no idea how to capture something that possessed its own will.
I cannot help you with this. Sentient characters cannot be seized by force, treasures, or ordinary immortal abilities. The instant they sense greed or impure intentions, they will destroy themselves. Even an upper 5 tiers cultivator would be unable to restore them afterward.
The answer came to Chen Ping'an almost immediately. He would gather the characters, preserve them, and someday return them to the burial river goddess at Green Roving Residence. He had never asked for these characters to become sentient. They had originated from Green Roving Residence, so they should return there and become part of the burial river goddess's inheritance. That single thought revealed why force was unnecessary. Chen Ping'an did not see the characters as spoils to be claimed, but as an inheritance entrusted to his care. In the world of cultivation, such sincerity could sometimes accomplish what overwhelming power could not. The green characters had been darting about in uncertainty. The instant they sensed his decision, every character transformed into a tiny figure dressed in green robes. More than 1,000 miniature figures bowed and kowtowed toward Chen Ping'an, offering their gratitude with complete sincerity. Then they joined together into a flowing green stream and surged into the acupoint that Chen Ping'an intended to make the future home of his water seal. Fan Junmao rolled her eyes and collapsed backward in a huff.
Is there no end to this bastard's luck? I've never seen anything so ridiculous.
The jade slip itself had now been fully refined. Several of the taller green-robed figures gathered around it, lifted it onto their shoulders, and solemnly carried it into Chen Ping'an's acupoint. Yet the little figures apparently felt that bowing and carrying the jade slip were not enough. They immediately began working to repay him. Some hurried to the entrance of the acupoint and painted a pair of door gods. Others spread across the inner walls, drawing a vast river that seemed to flow through the once empty space. In moments, the bare and lifeless acupoint became vivid and exuberant, as though an entire miniature realm had begun taking shape within Chen Ping'an's body. This was more than decoration. The figures were turning an empty acupoint into a suitable residence for water fortune, laying foundations that could aid the water seal when Chen Ping'an finally refined it. Even his unexpected blessings seemed determined to prepare the road ahead. Fan Junmao's jaw nearly fell through the sea of clouds. She sprang upright and pointed directly at him.
Chen Ping'an, are you the reincarnation of some ancient rain god?
Chen Ping'an was already returning the unused natural treasures from the cloud table to his storage treasures. Every movement was careful and methodical. Are you trying to flatter me? If so, you've certainly chosen an unusual approach. At Fan Junmao's command, the gigantic flower bud of clouds opened. She appeared beside Chen Ping'an in an instant and scrutinized him from head to toe.
You don't resemble a rain god at all. How did you persuade those tiny figures to submit so willingly?
Chen Ping'an ignored her astonishment. Once the last treasure had been packed away, he rose and smiled. How do I return? Fan Junmao snapped her fingers. The clouds beneath Chen Ping'an slowly separated, revealing a staircase that descended directly toward the dust medicinal shop. Rainbow light flashed around the steps. Chen Ping'an recognized it as the radiance created when two different flows of time collided. Protected by that temporal distortion, his descent would remain invisible to everyone in Old Dragon City except cultivators of the upper 5 tiers. Chen Ping'an thanked Fan Junmao and stepped onto the cloud staircase. As he descended, the vast scenery of Old Dragon City spread beneath him in all its grandeur. He silently decided that this sight deserved to be recorded on a bamboo slip. The next time he met Ning Yao, he would tell her everything. Amid treasures, immortal mantras, and shifting flows of time, Chen Ping'an's thought still returned to someone with whom he wished to share the journey. That simple impulse kept his path grounded in the mortal world. It was early morning on the final day of the year. Ordinary households throughout Old Dragon City were already celebrating, seemingly untouched by the tension weighing upon the city's great clans. The Fu clan had lifted the lockdown. Streets and alleys, once again, overflowed with voices, footsteps, decorations, and the warmth of approaching New Year festivities. At the dust medicinal shop, the cloud staircase vanished the instant Chen Ping'an stepped into the small alley. The Zhao clan Yin soul visibly relaxed upon seeing him return unharmed.
Did you successfully refine your bonded item?
Not yet. I only refined a piece of water essence, but it will greatly improve my chances when I attempt the bonded item again.
That is excellent news.
Chen Ping'an returned to the medicinal shop's counter. He had already put away his golden jade tablet the previous night. Otherwise, it would have continued devouring the Sea of Clouds water fortune and driven Fan Junmao into a rage. By now, Zheng Dafeng could move around again. That morning, he ordered Pei Qian to carry a small stool beneath the locust tree so he could meet the old man whom Julian praised so highly. The old man was already reclining beneath the tree with a book in hand. Julian had also risen early, eager to study beside this respected senior. The moment Zheng Dafeng sat down, he changed his mind and dismissed Pei Qian, telling her to return to the shop and entertain herself. Pei Qian immediately stretched out her hand. She had carried the stool as promised, and now she wanted the copper coin she had been promised in return. In her mind, the matter was perfectly just. Labor deserved payment, and even Chen Ping'an could not fault her for demanding what she had rightfully earned.
I'll add an extra copper coin to your New Year's money.
No, I don't like people owing me money. Besides, carrying a debt into the final day of the year is a terrible omen. Refuse to repay me now, and you'll be unlucky for the entire coming year.
The old man, still resting in his wicker chair, solemnly agreed that this was the worst possible time to owe a debt. Even a single copper coin, he warned, could damage Zheng Dafeng's fortune for the whole year. Zheng Dafeng searched every pocket he possessed, but after a long struggle, he failed to produce even half a coin. The old man proposed a solution. Zheng Dafeng could sell him the stool, then use the purchase money to pay Pei Qian. Zheng Dafeng considered this entirely reasonable. It was only a stool, and Chen Ping'an could make another. The young man was skilled with his hands and enjoyed crafting furniture, shelves, and other small objects. Pei-chan rolled her eyes at both men.
You two are the stinkiest people I've ever met. Forget it. I'll spare you this time and consider it an act of charity from my generous heart. There's no need to thank me. Just remember the enormous favor I've done for you.
She swaggered back toward the alley while practicing her walking meditation. Halfway there, she suddenly decided to imitate the sweeping kick once demonstrated by Lu Baixiang. Pei-chan sprang into the air, completed an impressive full turn, and sent her legs sweeping outward. For one glorious instant, the technique looked almost perfect. Then she landed like a puppet whose strings had been cut and crashed heavily onto the ground. She leaped upright at once and pretended nothing had happened. Only after reaching the alley, where she believed no one could see her, did she begin hopping in pain and pulling miserable faces. Pei-chan's pride was already stronger than her landing technique. Still, the courage to attempt a move, fail, and immediately rise again was perhaps the beginning of every martial path.
Who is that little girl? What a mischievous bundle of joy.
She is my young master's unofficial disciple, and yes, she is extremely mischievous.
Zhang Dafeng cupped his fist toward the old man in a respectful martial salute.
I have long heard of your reputation, esteemed senior.
You are too courteous, Brother Dafeng. Within our circle, I am known as Footlong Spear, and some also call me Young Ascended Immortal. Tell me, which celestial maiden do you admire most?
Heroine Hylian of the Invincible Divine Fist Sect.
Your taste is rather ordinary, Brother Dafeng.
With only a few words, the two men discovered that they walked entirely different paths. Zhang Dafeng gave a cold harumph and dragged his stool several meters away. The old man answered the hostility in kind, shifting his wicker chair away before settling back down. Between them, Julien remained crouched on his haunches, utterly absorbed in an expensive book printed by an immortal sect. The beautiful women illustrated on its pages could actually move.
It is truly tragic that celestial maiden Xianxia fell from grace at the height of her prime.
The old man's eyes brightened. Xianxia had once ranked among the two greatest celestial maidens beneath the heavens in the eyes of both himself and handsome, chivalrous young man. He desperately wanted to respond, but his earlier disagreement over Hylian still stood between them like an invisible wall.
Years ago, I was fortunate enough to see Celestial Maiden He of Divine Edict Sect with my own eyes. She walked elegantly through a forest leading a white deer. Thinking back, I was only a few steps away from her.
The old man's resistance shattered instantly.
Upon further consideration, Heroine Hylian is indeed an excellent choice, Brother Dafeng.
Zhang Dafeng picked up his stool and returned to the medicinal shop without saying a single word. The old man sat in silence for a long time. Then he struck one fist into his opposite palm, his face filled with regret.
Brother Dafeng has clearly seen far more of the world than I have. A fool like me had no right to criticize his taste. Now that I have offended him, I am one step farther from Celestial Maiden He. Had he introduced us, I could have boasted endlessly when I next met handsome, chivalrous young man at the Invincible Divine Fist Sect. Even he would have been forced to admit defeat.
Julien offered a distracted response without lifting his attention from the moving beauties in his book. The old man reclined against his wicker chair and sighed toward the sky.
The peach blossoms of this world are fickle and elusive. Who can pluck such a treasured flower and plant it within their own heart?
Those words are truly profound, Senior.
The old man nodded with satisfaction before admitting that the line had come from handsome, chivalrous young man.
He possesses extraordinary literary talent. His arguments can be rather crude, but profound sayings escape his mouth as naturally as breathing. Without that gift, I would not respect him nearly as much.
Julien wet his fingertip, turned a page, and nodded.
Should the opportunity arise, I will certainly pay this esteemed senior a visit.
When do you intend to break through to the Vajra body tier? Would you like me to watch over the process?
That will not be necessary, Senior. With my young master watching over me, I am confident that everything will proceed smoothly.
Your young master sounds like an exceptional man.
Julian suddenly closed the book in his hands.
Senior, may I ask whether you are an unpolished jade tier cultivator from some mighty immortal sect?
You are slightly mistaken.
The reply was deliberately ambiguous, and Julian chose not to press him further. In the martial world, curiosity could uncover secrets, but it could also destroy trust. Julian understood that knowing too much about the old man might damage the comfortable bond they had only just formed. Inside the dust medicinal shop, Chen Ping'an stood behind the counter. The piece of dragon-slaying platform before him had already been gnawed down to a thin scrap by 1st and 15th. He had no intention of being stingy. Once the remaining fragment was consumed, he would simply bring out an even larger piece. The 2 flying swords were not ordinary weapons to be stored away after battle. They were living foundations of Chen Ping'an's future strength, and every spark carved from the dragon-slaying platform was an investment in battles yet to come. Zhang Dafeng placed his stool outside the shop entrance. Though he had watched the 2 flying swords feast upon the dragon-slaying platform countless times, the sight still left him stunned.
Those 2 tiny things consume even more wealth than your golden sweet Windao robe.
Are gold essence copper coins no longer being produced? Zhang Dafeng leaned against the counter and watched Peng, 1st and 15th, scatter brilliant sparks across the dragon-slaying platform.
That's right. Jewel Small World has already fallen, so gold essence copper coins have lost their original purpose. Naturally, no one is forging them anymore. At this point, even if you offered them to the old man for nothing, he would refuse.
A currency could be rarer than ever and still lose its practical value. With Jewel Small World gone, the meaning behind the coins had changed. And in the cultivation world, meaning often mattered more than scarcity alone. I only know that a gold essence copper coin is more precious than a grain rain coin. I don't know the reason, or how large the difference truly is. How many grain rain coins can 1 gold essence copper coin be exchanged for? Instead of answering Chen Ping'an's question, Zhang Dafeng countered with one of his own.
You don't know how gold essence copper coins are forged, do you? Their primary material comes from the shattered godly bodies of mountain and river gods. Even the secondary materials are exceedingly difficult to obtain. Only after all of that can the 3 varieties be forged: good fortune coins, greeting spring coins, and offering coins. The fortune of the Great Li Empire has always been stable. Illegitimate temples are extremely rare within its borders, which is precisely why gold essence copper coins are so expensive there. Beyond Great Li, however, fragments of godly bodies can sometimes be purchased for almost nothing.
The truth behind those coins was far darker than their golden radiance suggested. They were not merely treasures of cultivation. Many had been minted from the ruins of divinity itself.
Many immortal sects and clans actively hunt illegitimate mountain and river gods. When there aren't enough unlawful temples to destroy, they pressure mortal empires into stripping legitimate gods of their official titles. Once those gods lose their legitimacy, they can be hunted without restraint. Even when a mortal empire refuses to cooperate, immortal powers still have other methods. They hire itinerant cultivators to carry out the dirty work, offering mediocre techniques and treasures in exchange for fragments of godly bodies. Using such methods, the true cost of producing 1 gold essence copper coin may not even equal a single grain rain coin. Yet if the Emperor of Great Li tried to purchase one from the outside world, the price could rise to 7 or 8 grain rain coins.
This was the cruelty of the cultivation world laid bare. Power determined legitimacy, legitimacy determined guilt, and guilt determined whose remains could be turned into currency. The value of the coin came not only from its spiritual properties, but also from the bloodless authority to declare a god lawful or unlawful. Are there still any gold essence copper coins left in the world?
That's difficult to say. If someone suddenly began purchasing them in large quantities, everyone would immediately realize that the coins were essential to that person's cultivation. Any seller with half a mind would raise the price to an unprecedented level.
Chen Ping'an released a faint sigh and massaged his temples. In the present age, very few people still required gold essence copper coins. Unfortunately, he was one of them. And his need could not be satisfied by one or two coins. Even several full pouches might prove insufficient. The lives of the 4 picture scroll martial artists depended upon them. Repairing and strengthening the golden sweet wine robe required them. Refining his future metal attribute bonded item would consume even more. For that bonded item, gold essence copper coins would serve a role much like the jade slip used during the refinement of the water seal. Chen Ping'an's burden was not born from greed. Every coin represented a promise, a life, a damaged treasure, or another step along a cultivation path that allowed no carelessness. The greater his foundation became, the more terrifying the resources needed to sustain it would be.
Stop looking so miserable. You should bid farewell to the year with a smile on your face.
Chen Ping'an smiled and nodded. Yet, while one corner of the world prepared to welcome a new year, Parasol Leaf Sect remained trapped in a calamity with no end in sight. Zuo You continued to roam through the sect. Wherever he passed, unmatched sword chi swept across mountains and waterways, effortlessly destroying the fortune accumulated there. Destruction required only a moment. Repair demanded everything. Golden core and nascent tier cultivators followed behind him, desperately gathering the scattered spiritual energy and attempting to mend the wounds he left across the landscape. Only by sacrificing portions of their own cultivation bases could they accelerate the recovery and prevent the sect's spiritual energy from leaking away. But these earth immortals were pillars of Parasol Leaf Sect. If they sacrificed too much, the sect's damaged foundation would only crumble faster. Zuo Yu's strategy was more devastating than a massacre. He forced the sect's strongest cultivators to choose between preserving the land and preserving themselves. No matter which path they took, Parasol Leaf Sect would lose something it could not easily replace. Not long ago, Parasol Leaf Sect had been the most spiritually abundant blessed land on the entire continent. Now, even its lowest-ranking disciples understood that the sect was facing the greatest crisis in its history. What confused them most was Du Mao's silence. Within the sect, Du Mao had once been regarded as a living god, yet he had not appeared even once to confront Zuo You. The sect had launched a failed assassination attempt, and its sect leader had tried to de-escalate the conflict. Beyond that, nothing had been done. A catastrophe was tearing through Parasol Leaf Sect, yet the most powerful chi refiner on the continent seemed determined to ignore it. Even so, most chi refiners on Parasol Leaf Continent continued to believe that the moment Du Mao emerged, Zuo You would be crushed and his rampage would end. Their confidence did not come from evidence. It came from reputation. For countless years, the name Du Mao had stood above the continent like an unshakable mountain, and few were willing to accept that the mountain might already be hollow. Nearly every major cultivation power, mortal empire, and influential clan on the continent watched the unfolding disaster. After Zhang Shangzhen's visit, increasing numbers of earth immortals arrived near Parasol Leaf Sect, They concealed their auras and observed from a distance, unwilling to step onto the battlefield themselves. They employed immortal abilities to inspect the sect's changing fortune. At first, none of them could believe that a lone swordsman had inflicted such severe wounds upon the enormous power that was Parasol Leaf Sect. Had two mortal empires fought a war, and one suffered damage equal to what Parasol Leaf Sect had already endured, the result would have been called a crushing defeat. And throughout it all, Zuo You had not taken a single life. He barely drew his sword, except to tear through barriers or remove obstacles. Nevertheless, everyone could see that the disciples' spirits were being crushed more thoroughly with each passing day. This was why Zuo Yu's punishment was so merciless. Killing disciples would have allowed Parasol Leaf Sect to mourn them as heroes. By sparing their lives while dismantling everything they trusted, he forced them to witness the collapse of their pride with open eyes. For 1,000 years, the disciples of Parasol Leaf Sect had possessed unparalleled confidence. That confidence strengthened their Tao hearts and accelerated their cultivation beyond that of ordinary chi refiners. Whenever they encountered an opponent they could not defeat, they needed only to announce the name of their sect. After that, they could insult the other party without fearing retaliation. Whenever one disciple suffered a grievance, fellow disciples gathered at once, confronted the offender, and claimed heads without hesitation. Generations of such dominance had forged headstrong, unyielding personalities. Countless disciples had fought to the death and met their ends with smiles upon their faces. Had Du Mao or the sect leader rallied everyone on the first day of Zuo Yu's arrival, at least half the sect would have willingly sacrificed themselves to confront him. Their deaths would have changed nothing, but they would have charged forward without hesitation. Now, however, their hearts had changed. They could only pray that Du Mao would finally appear and strike Zuo Yu down. At the same time, doubt gnawed at them like an unseen blade. What had their sect done to provoke such an almighty swordsman? Why was Du Mao hiding inside Parasol Leaf's small world like a turtle sealed within its shell? What crime could have brought such a calamity upon them? In the past, Parasol Leaf Sect had treated others with arrogance and unreasonable force, following the simple doctrine that might made right. Only after swallowing their own medicine did they discover how bitter it truly was. The sect's Tao hearts had been built upon invincibility rather than introspection. Once that illusion shattered, loyalty remained, but certainty vanished. In my view, this wound to their collective spirit was even harder to repair than the damaged mountains and rivers. In truth, Xianxia had never left the region. Hundreds of kilometers away, he sat atop a mountain summit, sharing fine wine with an old nascent-tier swordsman with whom he had maintained a close friendship for many years.
Most of Parasol Leaf Sect's foundation has already collapsed.
Don't say that. Du Mao is an ascension tier cultivator. If he defeats this sword immortal, the sect may still survive. Better yet, defeating such a formidable enemy could elevate Parasol Leaf Sect's reputation to unprecedented heights.
Zhang Shangzhen maintained the solemn expression for only a moment before bursting into uncontrollable laughter.
That's what I would say if I were completely delusional. Du Mao is finished. Our sect leader just informed me that Du Mao's bonded celestial weapon, the sword-devouring arc, was smashed to pieces in Old Dragon City. Even his Yang Soul avatar was taken by someone else. Right now, he's nothing more than an immortal tier cultivator, and even that cultivation base is unstable. Our sect leader is ecstatic. For the next 500 years, the sect will take 10% less from the Cloud Cave Blessed Land. Sword Immortal Zuo You, esteemed Immortal Chen. You two are truly my lucky stars. Were you standing before me now, I would kneel and kowtow 500 times without hesitation, and even that would not express my gratitude.
Xianxia pounded the stone table with his fist, laughing until tears streamed from his eyes. His delight at Du Mao's misfortune could scarcely have been more obvious. The revelation completely overturned the visible power balance. To outsiders, Du Mao remained an ascent colossus. In reality, his celestial weapon was gone. His Yang Soul avatar had been lost, and his remaining cultivation was barely stable at the immortal tier. You was not besieging an untouchable god. He was cornering a wounded man whose reputation had outlived his strength.
What do you think Parasol Leaf Sect will do next?
Wait, let me laugh a little longer. I can't stop yet.
The old swordsman could only respond with a helpless smile. Zhang Shangzhen, Lu Fang, and the old swordsman had been friends for a very long time. The swordsman was already accustomed to Zhang Shangzhen's shameless temperament. At last, Zhang Shangzhen brought his laughter under control.
What else can they do? Du Mao has no choice but to make one final, desperate roll of the dice. He is the one at fault, so he cannot reason with Zuo You. Even with every unpolished jade tier cultivator in the sect supporting him, he still cannot defeat Zuo You. If Zuo You refuses to spare Parasol Leaf Sect, then by my estimate, he will need only 1 year to raze the entire sect to the ground. Under ordinary circumstances, the Confucian Academy would have intervened long before the situation became this severe. Yet it has remained silent. What does that tell us? It tells us that Parasol Leaf Sect is at fault. Zuo You forced his way into their territory, but he has not taken a single life. Every action he has taken be justified. The Academy on Parasol Leaf Continent cannot stop him, and even the Confucian schools of Middle Earth Divine Continent are powerless to interfere. And
people often say that an intellectual can kill without shedding blood. This is a perfect example.
Zuo Yu's greatest shield was not merely his swordsmanship. It was restraint, because he killed no one and acted within a defensible moral boundary. Every Confucian institution that might have opposed him was left without sufficient cause to draw its own blade. Zhang Shangzhen turned his gaze toward Parasol Leaf Sect. Even from hundreds of kilometers away, he could see murkiness spreading through its mountain and water fortune. He was delighted to witness the sect's downfall, yet even he felt a trace of melancholy toward the self-inflicted tragedy that had consumed Du Mao.
Du Mao has only one path remaining. He must exhaust all of the spiritual energy in Parasol Leaf Small World at once, and use it to force an ascension. If he succeeds, he will secure a place in the heavens. According to the rules established by the etiquette sage, the Confucian Academy will then be obligated to protect Parasol Leaf Sect in his absence for a very long time. Should that happen, Zuo You will have to relent unless he is prepared to oppose the entire Confucian orthodoxy.
Zhang Shangzhen pressed his palms together, lifted them high above his head, and closed his eyes with exaggerated devotion.
Please, 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 great sword immortal Zuo, whatever happens, do not let Du Mao survive this ordeal.
The old swordsman stroked his beard, his eyes shining with the same unmistakable delight. Du Mao had always looked down upon swordsmen. He had insulted those who fell beneath his power and treated their paths with contempt. Now a swordsman had forced him to hide inside a small world, too frightened to emerge. There was a harsh symmetry in Du Mao's fate. The path he had mocked now stood outside his final refuge, and the sword he had underestimated had become the blade hanging over his ascension. On the final day of the year, as dusk descended, Parasol Leaf Small World finally revealed itself above the summit of the ancestral mountain. It appeared like a magnificent mirage suspended between heaven and earth. Then its surface began to tremble. A heartbeat later, the small world shattered. Countless fragments blazed across majestic world like radiant asteroids. Some faded into nothingness, others tore into the void and flew toward destinations no one could name. Upon the ancestral mountain, Du Mao's physical body began to disappear. Only his yin soul remained, transformed into a golden Tao manifestation. After devouring most of the spiritual energy within Parasol Leaf small world, the manifestation expanded to a height of tens of thousands of meters, towering over the ancestral summit. Though it remained the golden Tao manifestation of a chi refiner, 5-colored radiance poured from its immense form, illuminating mountains, clouds, and distant rivers. Du Mao had abandoned his physical body and consumed the accumulated spiritual energy of an entire small world. This was no ordinary breakthrough. It was the final gamble of a cultivator burning his sect's inheritance to purchase one chance at survival. The golden Tao manifestation reached upward with both hands. Then, with a violent outward motion, it tore at the heavens of majestic world. A colossal rift opened in the sky. Purple lightning writhed within it without end, and mountainous silhouettes flashed through the opening like ancient nightmares moving beyond the world. A skeletal flood dragon soared through the lightning. An enormous set of golden remains sat cross-legged in the darkness. A gigantic red claw reached toward the rift, attempting to tear it wider. They were dreadful visions belonging to realms beyond majestic world. Below that world-tearing spectacle, Zuo You held his sword in one hand while the other remained clasped behind his back. He slowly rose into the air. Before Du Mao's towering golden Tao manifestation, Zuo You appeared smaller than a speck of dust. Yet when he reached the sky, he performed a single horizontal slash. The motion was slow, languid, almost careless. And that was all. Zuo, you had always believed that only 2 swords in the world stood at the true pinnacle. One was the sword wielded by the scholar of Middle Earth, Divine Continent, the sword that had sliced Yellow River small world apart. The other was the sword resting in his own scabbard. Zuo Yu's confidence did not require thunderous techniques or countless sword projections. His entire path had been compressed into purity. One swordsman, one blade, one line separating success from failure. Against such mastery, size, and accumulated spiritual energy became little more than distractions. Du Mao's golden Tao manifestation continued ascending. Then a white line appeared around its waist, so thin that it resembled a single strand of hair. As the manifestation drew closer to the heavens, its enormous body separated into 2 halves. The upper half continued rising, fury and indignation burning across its face. Its hands reached desperately toward the edges of the heavenly rift, seeking to drag itself into the realm beyond. Its lower half shattered. The immense spiritual energy contained within it surged back into heaven and earth. Around a dozen 5-colored fragments shot away in every direction, destined to become fated opportunities on the cultivation paths of others. Zuo Yu's sword was already back inside its scabbard. The upper half of the golden Tao manifestation lost all momentum and fell back toward the earth. It descended like a brilliant shooting star, its radiance slowly dissolving across the darkening sky. Du Mao sacrificed his body, his small world, and nearly everything Parasol Leaf Sect had accumulated. Yet Zuo You ended the ascension with one stroke. The contrast could not have been clearer. One side relied upon boundless quantity, while the other had reached an almost absolute quality. Zuo. You glanced once at the rift in the heavens. Then he turned and flew toward the vast sea separating Parasol Leaf Continent from eastern treasured Vile Continent. Not long after reaching the sea, he stopped. The scholarly sage stood only a few meters away.
Why didn't you ascend?
Zuo You gave no answer. The scholarly sage pointed toward the heavenly rift that Du Mao had torn open. Anger surged through his voice, but beneath it lay fear and sorrow.
Why didn't you use this chance to leave the world? Do you truly intend to die here?
Zuo You lowered his head and remained silent. This time, the scholarly sage did not leap forward to slap him on the head. The anger faded from his face, leaving only a sullen weariness.
Go. I know you've always wanted to visit Stalactite Mountain and the Sword Chi Great Wall. Go on then. If you are determined to make me sad, there is nothing I can do to stop you.
Only now did the true cost of Zuo Yu's sword become visible. He had defeated Du Mao, but he had also allowed a precious chance to ascend to pass him by. Whatever road awaited him next, both master and disciple understood that it might lead toward death. Zuo Yu extended a deep bow.
Disciple Zuo Yu bids farewell to his teacher.
The scholarly sage waved dismissively, unable to force another word from his throat. Zuo Yu turned to leave, yet instead of flying away, he walked across the sea one step at a time, as though every step made the distance between master and disciple harder to bear.
Teacher, you accepted a remarkable disciple in my junior brother.
Get out of here!
The scholarly sage turned away as well. Master and disciple stood with their backs toward each other. One remained in place. The other continued walking into the distance. Then the scholarly sage scratched his head, and memories from a distant past rose within him. Back then, he had been an impoverished, nameless scholar. His first disciple, Kui Chan, had come from a wealthy clan, yet taking Kui Chan as a student had done nothing to improve his poverty. His second and third disciples had not possessed much wealth either. In those days, the three disciples had gotten along well. Those had been the happiest years the scholarly sage had ever spent with them. But one by one they had grown up. The mightiest cultivators could cut apart small worlds and challenge the heavens, yet none could stop disciples from growing beyond the peaceful days of their youth. This farewell carried no grand technique, but emotionally it may have been heavier than Zuo Yu's sword. The scholarly sage spoke softly toward the disciple who was already walking away.
I have never told you this, Zuo Yu, but compared with your swordsmanship, I believe you are an even better scholar.
Zuo Yu did not stop walking.
It is only because you taught me well, teacher.
On the final day of the year, the dust medicinal shop laid the old year to rest beneath a tide of crimson paper. 4 sets of couplets had to be replaced, one at the shop entrance and one for each of the 3 rooms in the rear courtyard. Chen Ping'an, Pei Qian, Zheng Dafeng, and Lu Baixiang each took up a brush. None of them tried to compose anything profound. They simply copied auspicious verses from a cheap booklet bought at the market, allowing familiar blessings to carry their hopes into the coming year. Chen Ping'an's characters were precise and disciplined, each stroke resembling a model from a calligraphy manual. Lu Baixiang's brushwork flowed with graceful freedom, while Zhang Dafeng's writing possessed an effortless strength that was difficult to dismiss. Then came Pei Qian. She had volunteered with complete confidence and written with painstaking care, yet when she finally raised her brush, the result before her bore little resemblance to the masterpiece she had imagined. Julian stared at the crooked characters and shook his head again and again. Even Wei Xian, who sincerely praised her determination, could only admit that the finished couplet lacked a certain elegance. Pei Chan stood beside her work with rare embarrassment, but Chen Ping'an spared her from further humiliation. Couplets are hung to welcome good fortune. There is no need to judge every brushstroke so harshly. For Chen Ping'an, the value of the couplet did not lie in flawless technique. Pei Chan had written it with sincerity, and guiding that sincerity mattered far more than correcting a few awkward strokes. Pei Qian, Wei Shan, and Sui Yubian were assigned to hang the couplets, while Chen Ping'an and Zhang Dafeng remained below, offering an endless stream of directions. Having already failed to impress anyone with her writing, Pei Qian was determined to reclaim her dignity. She adjusted the paper a fraction to the left, then a fraction to the right, pressing every corner flat until sweat poured from her forehead. Yet every time she thought the couplet was straight, another instruction came from below. At last, Sui Yubian's patience snapped.
Both of you be quiet.
Only after Chen Ping'an and Zhang Dafeng fell silent did Pei Qian finally manage to finish the task. The characters for spring had all been written by Chen Ping'an, while every character for fortune had come from Zhang Dafeng's brush. The courtyard soon surrendered to the fragrance of the kitchen. Zhu Lian spent nearly the entire afternoon preparing the final feast of the year, with Chen Ping'an and Pei Qian helping him wash, cut, and arrange the ingredients. At one point, Su Yubian came to the kitchen. She stood quietly at the entrance for a time, watching the three figures working amid the steam and clatter, then departed without saying anything. By evening, Zhu Lian had produced a feast worthy of closing out the year. Meat and vegetables filled the table in careful balance, while two dishes occupied the places of honor, a braised fish and a pot of pig trotter slowly cooked until rich and tender. The fish carried a special blessing. In the local tongue, the words for fish and abundance shared the same sound. So serving fish at year's end was a wish that the household would possess more than enough in the year ahead. Zhang Dafeng occupied the main seat. Lu Baixiang and Wei Shan sat to his left, while Sui Yubian and Pei Qian sat to his right. Chen Ping'an and Zhu Lian took the bench near the doorway. The Zhao clan Yin Soul was also invited to join them, but the old spirit politely refused and remained apart from the living. Pei Qian looked at Sui Yubian, then at the place where she was seated. A mischievous light immediately appeared in her eyes.
Big sister right side really is sitting on the right side.
The joke relied on the literal meaning of Sui Yubian's name, but Sui Yubian answered not with words, but with 2 fingers. She seized Pei Qian's ear and gave it a merciless twist.
Mercy, big sister, mercy.
Beside the feast rested a jar of the finest osmanthus wine from the Fan clan's Osmanthus Island. Its fragrance was delicate yet penetrating, its flavor smooth, and its sweetness lingered long after every sip. Chen Ping'an noticed Pei Qian staring at the jar as though it contained an immortal treasure. She had labored over the couplets and helped in the kitchen, and the wine itself was mild, so he poured her only a tiny amount, no more than 2 or 3 sips. You are only being allowed this because today is special. Should you secretly drink at any other time, the punishment will be severe.
I understand.
Under Chen Ping'an's insistence, Zhang Dafeng had to take the first bite before anyone else could begin. That was not enough. Chen Ping'an also demanded that the shopkeeper offer a toast and say a few words for the new year. Zhang Dafeng normally possessed skin thick enough to withstand a blade, yet with every gaze fixed upon him, his confidence vanished. He raised his cup awkwardly.
May everyone pass the coming year safely, and may prosperity follow us wherever we go.
Only then was Pei Qian permitted to taste the wine. The instant the sweetness touched her tongue, her eyes shone like twin lanterns, and the pure delight of a child spread across her face. She had never imagined that such a delicious drink could exist. For the first time, growing older no longer seemed entirely unpleasant. Once she became an adult, she reasoned, surely she would be free to drink as much as she pleased. Her conclusion was childish, but the scene revealed something gentler beneath it. Pei Qian was beginning to associate adulthood not merely with power or freedom, but with belonging at the same table as everyone else. The year's final meal became a loud and joyous affair. Neither Chen Ping'an nor Zhang Dafeng lingered on the wounds of Jewel's small world or the shifting currents of Dragon Spring Prefecture. Instead, Zhang Dafeng questioned Chen Ping'an about the strange people and extraordinary events of the lotus flower blessed land. He was especially fascinated by the four martial artists who had emerged from the picture scrolls, as well as Ding Ying, the man who had once stood at the summit of that world before Chen Ping'an arrived. Zhang Xianxia also caught Zhang Dafeng's interest, so Chen Ping'an recounted several encounters with that elusive, otherworldly immortal. From there, the conversation drifted towards secrets concerning the many worlds hidden beyond ordinary sight. The 10 great worlds and 36 small worlds were commonly regarded as blessed paradises. Their spiritual energy surpassed that of ordinary lands, and many contained opportunities left behind by ancient immortals who had either perished or successfully ascended. To cultivators, such places were not merely territories, they were vaults of inheritance, fields of destiny, and ladders that might carry a fortunate soul beyond the limits of mortality. Parasol Leaf Small World, for example, had effectively been seized by Du Mao alone. Though other upper 5 tiers cultivators belonged to Parasol Leaf Sect, he distributed only a sliver of the benefits while keeping the true harvest in his own hands. That monopoly revealed the brutal arithmetic of the cultivation world. When a single expert became strong enough, even the fortune of an entire sect could be reduced to property beneath his name. There were exceptions. The Tao ancestors' lotus flower small world stood beside the lotus flower blessed land, while Jewel Small World followed rules unlike almost any other hidden realm. Jewel Small World was neither famous for overwhelming spiritual energy, nor celebrated for mountains filled with rare treasures. Its true wealth was human. The residents of its small town possessed cultivation aptitude of astonishing quality. Across Majestic World, even an earth immortal could wander for years without finding a disciple worthy of inheriting his teachings. A gifted child might be incompatible with his cultivation art, while another might possess talent, but lack the temperament required to walk the Tao. Many earth immortals therefore crossed mountains and continents in search of a successor, only to return empty-handed. In Jewel Small World, however, unpolished gems capable of reaching the middle 5 tiers appeared in remarkable numbers. Such aptitude was not guaranteed even to children born from 2 immortals. This was why the humble alleys of that small town had drawn the attention of powers far greater than its residents could once comprehend. Its people were the treasure. After the meal, everyone changed into new clothing. Wei Shan resisted at first, complaining that unworn fabric felt stiff and uncomfortable. He even tried to argue that his imperial robe should be sufficient. Pei Chan refused to yield. Her nagging followed him from one end of the courtyard to the other, until the former emperor finally conceded, putting on the new clothes and boots prepared for him. For the occasion, Chen Ping'an also removed his golden sweet wine robe. In its place, he wore a long azure robe selected jointly by Pei Qian and Zuo You. He then distributed New Year's money to Pei Qian and the 4 picture scroll martial artists. Each received a red paper envelope containing 1 snowflake coin. Pei Qian knew that a single snowflake coin was worth 1,000 taels of silver. She clutched the envelope as though Chen Ping'an had handed her a kingdom. The 4 martial artists accepted theirs with gratitude, though none could rival her visible ecstasy. Then began the vigil to welcome the new year. One by one, the others retired until only Chen Ping'an, Zhang Dafeng, and Pei Qian remained beside the glowing fireplace. Chen Ping'an sat with one leg crossed over the other. The tiny lotus spirit perched upon the back of his foot, bouncing happily each time he swayed his leg through the warm firelight. He did not dare drink much of the basic refinement medicinal wine stored in his sword-nurturing gourd. Instead, he and Zhang Dafeng each consumed only a quarter liter of osmanthus wine throughout the night. As the flame slowly sank, Zhang Dafeng spoke of those who had grown up alongside Chen Ping'an: Ma Kushuan, Song Jishin, Zhao Yao, and Lin Shouyi. He also mentioned the younger children, including Li Baoping and Gu Kan.
Back then, I never imagined you would survive. I certainly never imagined you would reach where you stand today.
Pei Qian had already fallen asleep sometime during the night, so none of these old stories from Jewel's small world reached her ears. Zheng Dafeng eventually asked about Chen Ping'an's bonded porcelain, the object tied to his fate from birth. It was a white porcelain paperweight, shaped roughly like a hornless dragon. I kept several broken pieces in the clay pot at the corner of my ancestral home in Clay Vase Alley. Had the porcelain ever been completed, it would not have been presented to the imperial clan of the Great Li Empire. More likely, it would have vanished into the secret collection of some immortal manor. According to the old sword immortal from the Sword Chi Great Wall, the child born in Clay Vase Alley had once possessed the aptitude to become an earth immortal. The broken porcelain was more than a ruined object. It represented a destiny stolen before Chen Ping'an had ever understood what destiny meant. Yet the boy who lost the road to earth immortality had carved out another path with his own feet and fists. Zhang Dafeng did not continue pressing the matter, and Chen Ping'an did not insist on reopening an old wound. Some subjects were best left beside the dying fire. Instead, Zhang Dafeng pointed toward the courtyard outside.
Old Man Zhao is the ancestor of Zhao Yao's branch of the Zhao clan in Jewel's small world. After his death, the old man gathered his soul and preserved him as a yin soul. Should fortune favor him, he may someday become the god of a mountain within the Great Li Empire. He cannot hope to repeat Weibo's astonishing rise and become the northern mountain god, but reaching the level of the mountain god who was Gukan's father is not impossible.
I had already worked that out. Qi Jingchen had once left behind 3 drafts of spring wind, one for Chen Ping'an, one for Zhao Yao, and one for Song Jishin. Zhao Yao had failed to keep his most precious spring seal, yet Qi Jingchen had said he was not disappointed. At first, Chen Ping'an had found those words difficult to understand. Qi Jingchen was not someone who lowered his expectations merely to soften failure. In fact, he had regarded Zhao Yao somewhat more highly than Song Jishin. Only now did Chen Ping'an begin to understand. Perhaps Qi Jingchen had hoped that losing the spring seal would sever Zhao Yao's remaining ties to him. Freed from that burden, Zhao Yao could create something of his own or seek another lineage of teachings. If that allowed Zhao Yao to live a peaceful and secure life, Qi Jingchen would have considered it a worthy outcome. Qi Jingchen's concern had never been possession. He did not need every student to remain beneath his shadow. To him, allowing someone to walk safely away could be another form of teaching. Chen Ping'an knew he was not yet capable of such detachment. Perhaps after reading more books and meeting more people, his heart would broaden, but in his present state, he could not release people and grievances with Qi Jingchen's calm acceptance. Zhang Dafeng then revealed another secret, this one concerning Ma Kuxuan. The white cat beside him was no ordinary creature. Its value and mystery were at least comparable to the golden carp inside Gao Xuan's Dragon King basket, Ruan Shu's fire dragon bracelet, Zhao Yao's wooden dragon carving, Gu Kan's little catfish, and Song Jishin's 4-legged snake. Yet unlike those 5, the white cat had secretly entered Jewel's small world on its own. More importantly, it would acknowledge no master except Ma Kuxuan. Chen Ping'an recounted his 2 clashes with Ma Kuxuan, the first at the immortal tomb and the second upon the streets of Colorful Garment Nation. Zhang Dafeng found the story amusing rather than alarming.
Every 500 to 1,000 years, Jewel's small world produces 2 people destined to become either sworn enemies or lifelong friends. The ancestors of the great Li Empire's Cao clan and Yuan clan were an example of lifelong friendship. This time, perhaps you and Ma Kushuan are meant to forge a rivalry that lasts your entire lives.
That possibility carried more weight than a simple grudge. Chen Ping'an and Ma Kushuan had chosen radically different ways to wield strength, and every future meeting between them could become a contest between two paths born from the same small town. Chen Ping'an turned toward the window. Beyond it, darkness had thinned. The first morning of the new year had arrived. At this same time the previous year, he had still been wandering through the lotus flower blessed land like a soul without a road. Looking back now, those days seemed to belong to another lifetime. The moment Pei-chan awoke, she rushed into the alley with firecrackers in hand. Yet before lighting them, she paused and turned toward the Zhao clan Yinsol.
Will the noise frighten you?
No, go and enjoy yourself.
Only after receiving his reassurance did Pei-chan set the firecrackers alight. Sharp explosions raced through the alley, scattering the last silence of the old year. It was a small question, almost insignificant, yet it proved that Pei-chan was changing. The child who once acted before thinking had begun to notice whether her happiness might trouble someone else. Listening to the firecrackers, Zhang Dafeng suddenly asked a question far heavier than the festive morning suggested.
While Pei-chan remains beside you, you can restrain her and correct her. But what will happen after the day she leaves?
Chen Ping'an considered the question carefully before answering. Before that day comes, I will do everything I can to teach her what is right and what is wrong. Once she has a compass in her own heart, she will no longer need me beside her to command every step. As he spoke, Chen Ping'an used the tip of his foot to draw a circle upon the ground. She is still young, so I must establish rules and keep her within a small circle. Inside it, she may do as she likes, but when she steps beyond its boundary, I must reprimand her and explain where she went wrong. This cannot be rushed. I cannot lose patience merely because progress is slow. She is only 10 years old, and for someone of her age, I believe she is already doing quite well. This was Chen Ping'an's way of teaching. Rules first, understanding later, and freedom only when the heart could bear its weight. He did not want Pei-chan to obey him forever. He wanted her to become someone capable of choosing correctly when no one was watching.
Can she compare with you when you were 10?
Why should she be compared with me? Pei-chan is Pei-chan, and Chen Ping'an is Chen Ping'an.
Pei-chan was fortunate to meet you.
Chen Ping'an glanced sideways at him, unwilling to let such solemnity last. Were you not also fortunate to meet me? I have only visited Old Dragon City twice, yet I've already been forced to act as both your Tao mentor and your Tao guardian. At this rate, I may be too frightened to return a third time.
You performed acceptably as a Tao mentor, but as a Tao guardian, you were a complete failure.
Chen Ping'an burst into laughter and cupped his fist in exaggerated apology. Please forgive me, as a mere 5th-tier martial artist, my abilities are regrettably limited. Zhang Dafeng rolled his eyes, then released a deeply troubled sigh.
With my luck, how am I ever supposed to find a wife?
Soon afterward, Pei-chan marched into the backyard with a feather duster balanced across her shoulder, proudly declaring that her hiking pole had earned a day of rest. She immediately began distributing New Year's blessings with the seriousness of an imperial envoy.
Wei-xian, may you find a beautiful wife. Lu Baixiang, may your Go skills improve until you rank among the top 100 players beneath the heavens. Big Sister Sui, may you never gain a single wrinkle, and may you grow younger every day. Julian, may your cooking become even more delicious. Old Man Zhao, may your cultivation rise quickly so that you can carry me through the sky. Zheng Dafeng, may your shop earn mountains of money this year.
At last, she turned to Chen Ping'an and delivered her grandest blessing of all.
May gold, silver, and powerful treasures pour toward you without end.
Her wishes carried a simple intention. In the new year, she no longer wanted to be a burden upon anyone. In the past, Pei-chan had possessed an alarming talent for speaking misfortune into existence. Yet perhaps her luck had finally reversed. On the first day of the year, the good fortune she proclaimed began to manifest. According to the traditions of Eastern treasured vile continent, the first day of the year was reserved for leisure. Work was forbidden, and every household was expected to rest. Fan Junmao ignored that custom and arrived at the dust medicinal shop early in the morning. She first asked Chen Ping'an when he intended to return to the Sea of Clouds and continue refining his bonded item. Then she presented him with 3 pouches of gold essence copper coins, 1 pouch for each of the 3 varieties. Together, they contained roughly 3 dozen coins, all supplied by the Emperor of the Great Li Empire. That was not the end of the compensation. The Emperor had promised that more would follow. As the Great Li army continued marching south, illegitimate mountain and river gods encountered along the way would have their godly bodies destroyed. Even legitimate deities who refused submission might suffer the same fate. Fragments of those shattered godly bodies would then become the material needed to refine additional gold essence copper coins. Behind the glittering coins stood the Great Li Empire's relentless expansion. Every pouch of compensation was also evidence of mountains conquered, divine authorities broken, and an empire forcing the spiritual order of a continent to bow. Chen Ping'an looked toward Zheng Dafeng in confusion. Zheng Dafeng appeared equally baffled.
Were gold essence copper coins not supposed to have ceased production?
That is precisely why the Song clan chose them as compensation. How could they display sincerity by offering something ordinary? The Great Li Empire would never have gone this far unless the old man were personally applying pressure to the emperor. Those godly fragments would normally be far more useful for strengthening the bodies of the other 3 great mountain gods.
Chen Ping'an nodded. Her reasoning was sound.
But applying this sort of pressure does not sound like something the old man would do.
Fan Junmao's expression became exasperated.
Not long ago, an intercontinental ship traveling south from northern complete reed continent past eastern treasured vile continent. During its journey, a man dropped from the heavens and smashed down onto the land. By now, nearly everyone in the northern region has heard the news. Eastern treasured vile continent possesses another 10th-tier martial artist besides Song Changjing.
That must be Lear. I wonder when he will reach Old Dragon City.
If he boarded at the Dragon Spring Prefecture ferry station and is willing to spend enough money to accelerate the ship, he should arrive within the next few days.
He traveled from northern complete reed continent to the Great Li Empire at the northern edge of this continent, and now he is coming all the way to Old Dragon City in the far south. That is no small journey.
The humor faded from Zheng Dafeng's face.
What is happening at Parasol Leaf Sect?
A cold sneer appeared upon Fan Junmao's face.
Not one of Old Dragon City's cowardly earth immortals dares travel to Parasol Leaf Continent and investigate. Eastern Treasured Vile Continent has always stood beneath Parasol Leaf Continent, and Parasol Leaf Sect is its strongest and most overbearing immortal power. No one wishes to provoke its authority. Perhaps the Fu clan possesses private information, but the other great clans of the city may as well be blind. Still, I suspect Parasol Leaf Sect is already facing a grave disaster. Otherwise, Fuchi would never have offered the Old Dragon Rainbringer as compensation, much less the additional item he proposed. He still needs the consent of the Fu clan Ancestral Hall, but he promised to argue for it. Whenever you leave Old Dragon City, I will deliver the item personally.
Fan Junmao allowed the mystery to linger, then looked between the two men.
Why not guess what it is?
Remembering Pei Chan's sudden gift for speaking good fortune into reality, Chen Ping'an immediately called her into the courtyard. He briefly explained that the Fu clan might offer another treasure. Make a guess. Do not be modest. Choose the most ambitious possibility you can imagine. Pei Chan considered the matter with great seriousness before answering in an unexpectedly timid voice.
Could it be a pseudo-celestial tool?
Fan Junmao fell speechless. Chen Ping'an and Zhang Dafeng burst into laughter. Whether Pei Qian's guess was absurd or prophetic remained unknown. Yet the fact that Fu Qi was willing to discuss an item beyond the old dragon Rainbringer suggested that the pressure upon the Fu clan, and perhaps upon Parasol Leaf Sect, was far greater than anyone openly admitted. On the 5th day of the first month, the old man known as Footlong Spear was once again lounging at the dust medicinal shop. He cracked sunflower seeds while trading increasingly outrageous boasts with Pei Chan. Then another visitor entered the alley. He was short, broad, and powerfully built. As he passed, even Footlong Spear could not resist giving him a second look. A person like this was rarer than an unpolished jade tier cultivator. Before the 4-picture scroll martial artists even saw his face, fear surged from the deepest part of their bodies. It was not reasoned caution, but the primal warning of weaker creatures sensing an existence far above them. With every step he took toward the shop, they felt as though a colossal flood dragon were forcing its body into a narrow stream, leaving the surrounding world too small to contain it. The terror did not come from released killing intent or a deliberate display of cultivation. It came from Li Er's physical existence alone. To martial artists, his body was proof that the mortal frame could be refined into something approaching a natural calamity. How could such a martial artist exist beneath the heavens? Chen Ping'an and Zhang Dafeng, however, remained completely at ease. Only after observing their calm expressions did the 4-picture scroll martial artists manage to steady their hearts. Wei Shan rubbed his hands together in anticipation. Zhu Lian stood perfectly straight, fervor burning in his eyes. Lu Baxiang and Sui Yubian both abandoned the go-board between them and looked toward the approaching man. All 4 waited without breathing freely. Before them stood a summit of martial arts they had never imagined could exist. Chen Ping'an and Zhang Dafeng entered the shop with the visitor. Zhang Dafeng looked behind Li Er, then asked the first question that came to mind.
Your wife did not come with you?
Li Er's expression barely changed.
Had our master not ordered me to wait, I would already be standing at Parasol Leaf Sect.
Zhang Dafeng scratched his head and wisely offered no response. Li Er turned toward Chen Ping'an. Then, with the solemnity of one martial artist acknowledging another, he cupped his fists.
Chen Ping'an, Li Huai became far more mature and thoughtful after traveling with you. He learned many things that cannot be found in books. For that I owe you my thanks. Mr. Qi taught Li Huai well. Qi departed, you took up that responsibility and performed no less admirably. Therefore, I should address you as Mr. Chen.
For Chen Ping'an, those words carried a weight no treasure could equal. Li Er was not praising his cultivation or his fists. He was acknowledging that Chen Ping'an had continued a fragment of Qi Jingchen's unfinished work. Li Er did not linger. His destination lay beyond Old Dragon City, and the purpose of his journey was enough to shake an entire continent.
I must leave today to tear down Parasol Leaf Sect's ancestral hall, so I cannot waste time here. Before I go, there is one thing I must tell you. Ordinarily, I only use my fists when someone in my family has suffered an injustice. From this day onward, you need only send word. Whoever you believe deserves a beating will receive one. Should I hesitate for even a breath, then I am no longer worthy to call myself Li Huai's father.
Lear cupped his fists once more.
Farewell.
He turned and departed as abruptly as he had arrived, carrying the might of a 10th-tier martial artist southward toward Parasol Leaf Sect. Li Er had offered no elaborate alliance and demanded no repayment. He had simply placed his fists behind Chen Ping'an's judgment. In the martial world, that promise was more terrifying than an army and more valuable than a mountain of celestial treasures. And now, while the dust medicinal shop still carried the warmth of New Year's wine and red couplets, a 10th-tier martial artist was marching toward one of the most dominant sects beneath the heavens, intent on demolishing its ancestral hall with his own hands. Lear's visit to Dust Medicinal Shop lasted only a short while, yet the echo of his footsteps spread across Old Dragon City like a war drum beneath calm skies. A 10th-tier martial artist did not need to issue threats, display fists, or leave behind a decree. The mere fact that he had crossed that threshold was already a declaration powerful enough to shake every clan that understood the weight of martial authority. The Sun, Ding, Fang, and Hao clans might still have been blind to the meaning of that visit, but the direction of the coming tide had already been fixed. From this moment onward, Old Dragon City's wealth, manpower, ships, and influence would gradually flow north, drawing nearer to the great Li Empire's army entrenched in the central region of Eastern Treasured Vile Continent. This was not merely a change in alliances, it was the beginning of a continental reordering. Once a 10th-tier martial artist publicly placed his shadow over a small medicinal shop, every careful observer had to recalculate the balance of power. Those who understood early could survive the storm. Those who remained oblivious would discover the truth only when the current had already swept them away. The Fu clan, the Fan clan, and everyone inside Dust Medicinal Shop understood this perfectly. They knew that the apparent peace of the new year was only a thin layer of frost over deep, moving water. Not long after Lear departed, visitors from the Fan clan arrived to offer New Year greetings. They were all familiar faces to Chen Ping'an, Fan Junmao, and Fan Ir. Aunt Gui from Osmanthus Island, Aunt Gui's only direct disciple Jin Su, the Osmanthus girl who had once attended Chen Ping'an aboard the island, and Ma Ji, the Golden Courtier swordsman who had guided him along the path of the sword. Aunt Gui almost never set foot ashore in Old Dragon City. Osmanthus Island traveled between the city and Stalactite Mountain twice every year, yet even many members of the Fan clan's ancestral hall had never seen her in person. Her arrival at Dust Medicinal Shop therefore carried a quiet significance of its own. At the shop entrance, the old man known as Footlong Spear had expected another dull day. He had even been lamenting that he might not catch so much as a glimpse of Zuo You. The instant he saw so many women entering the alley, however, his spirits surged. He began carrying tea, arranging snacks, and attending to the guests with such diligence that one might have mistaken him for a lifelong employee of the shop. When Aunt Gui stepped inside, she happened to meet the old man's gaze. Their eyes touched for only a heartbeat. She gave him a courteous smile, then looked away. To the old man, Aunt Gui was not a peerless beauty who could overturn kingdoms with a glance. Her charm lay elsewhere. She seemed gentle, composed, and naturally elegant, the sort of woman whose presence could turn a house into a home. It was little wonder that Zhang Shangzhen's eldest son had once relied on Jade Tablet Sect's influence to pressure her. Hoping to purchase Osmanthus Island from the Fan clan, a vessel was valuable. A trade route was valuable, yet the true heart of Osmanthus Island had never been timber, formations, or cargo. It was Aunt Gui herself. Aunt Gui, meanwhile, could not see through the old man's cultivation. What she could see was an immaculate body, a thriving spirit, and a soul so supple that it seemed untouched by hidden damage. If he were truly only an earth immortal, then his path toward the upper five tiers remained wide open. Among earth immortals, the distance between two cultivators could be greater than the distance between earth and heaven. Realm alone never told the whole story. Foundation, body, soul, Tao heart, and future potential were all invisible blades concealed beneath the same robe. Aunt Gui's inability to judge him was itself a judgment of frightening weight. Chen Ping'an came out to welcome Aunt Gui in person. His gratitude toward her had never depended on her cultivation base, her connection to the Fan clan, or her authority over Osmanthus Island. During the journey through the Flood Dragon Trench, Chen Ping'an had once fallen into a terrifying state of emptiness. For an instant, it had felt as though the hearts of everyone around him had been laid bare. What he sensed was not warmth, but greed, malice, calculation, and countless hidden intentions. The shock left him feeling as if the entire world had become a den of concealed blades. Afterward, he sank into a quiet depression in his courtyard. In that darkness, only two memories still carried warmth. One belonged to the Fan's surnamed artist, who had painted 3 pictures for him. The other belonged to Aunt Gui, whose mind remained placid even after she had witnessed so many ugly faces of the world. Chen Ping'an remembered kindness with extraordinary stubbornness. To him, a moment of sincere warmth offered during despair could outweigh treasures, status, and favors measured in gold, essence, copper coins. This was one reason his Tao heart could bend without breaking. He never allowed the darkness he had seen to erase the light he had received. While the guests gathered in the hall, Faner slipped away toward Zheng Dafeng's room. He entered with anticipation, only to discover that the portrait of Zuo You had vanished. Zheng Dafeng cleared his throat, straightened his expression, and spoke with the gravity of a master instructing a wayward disciple.
The cultivation of the mind is just as important as the training of the body. From now on, stop doing such unscrupulous things.
Faner was briefly confused. Then enlightenment flashed across his face. He immediately lowered his head, summoned an expression of shame, and began defending himself with the smoothness of someone who had finally understood what answer his master wanted to hear.
My artist must bear part of the blame. I only asked him to paint a beautiful woman so that the portrait might improve your mood. I know how deeply you admire Celestial Maiden Su. As your disciple, I wanted to do something for you, so I merely described her peerless beauty and asked the artist to create the most flattering portrait possible.
Zheng Dafeng was immensely pleased. His disciple had finally learned how to turn danger into loyalty, and embarrassment into filial devotion. Unfortunately, Zuo You had already arrived at the doorway. Her voice entered the room like the edge of a sword sliding from its sheath.
The Fan Clan's artist must truly possess miraculous skill to paint such an accurate portrait of me from nothing but your verbal description.
Jinsu's brows tightened slightly. She had no romantic feelings for Faner, but he remained the undisputed heir to the Fan clan, and Osmanthus Island was already effectively his property. Zuo You, by contrast, was known as one of Chen Ping'an's followers. To describe Zuo You politely, she was a guest elder. To describe the relationship without decoration, she was still someone serving under Chen Ping'an. In Jinsu's eyes, her tone toward Faner crossed the line of proper conduct. Yet Old Dragon City had become a place where one careless sentence could offend a hidden expert, or fracture a fragile alliance. Aunt Gui had warned Jinsu to guard both her words and her actions. Thus, despite her displeasure, Jinsu remained silent. She knew that being Aunt Gui's sole disciple did not grant her the right to speak in every gathering. Her silence revealed more maturity than any sharp rebuke could have shown. In a turbulent city, restraint was not weakness. It was awareness of status, timing, and consequence. The martial world often praised those who spoke boldly, yet many disasters began with a single person failing to understand when silence was the wiser blade. Jinsu turned her attention back to Chen Ping'an. It had not been long since their last meeting, yet he seemed transformed. The rustic young drunkard she remembered had disappeared. The last traces of childish immaturity had faded, replaced by a calmness that did not need to announce itself. Dressed in a white robe, with a white jade hairpin securing his hair, and the familiar red wine gourd hanging at his waist, Chen Ping'an had grown taller and steadier. He sat with proper formality, yet without stiffness. Whenever he spoke, he met the other person's eyes, and his smile was relaxed, sincere, and free of calculation. True growth in Chen Ping'an was rarely displayed through realm breakthroughs alone. The sharper change was in his bearing. He had crossed mountains, seas, battlefields, and moral trials, and all of that hardship had settled into tranquility rather than arrogance. Such calmness was often more difficult to cultivate than sword chi. Jinsu then noticed the dark-skinned little girl standing beside him. Pei Qian's enormous eyes darted rapidly between Jinsu and Aunt Gui, as if she were secretly weighing the fortunes hidden inside their sleeves. Jinsu smiled warmly. Pei Qian immediately returned the smile. Pei Qian's private estimation, beautiful elder sisters such as Jinsu, Yao Jin, and Su Yubian all possessed swollen money pouches. Zhang Dafeng had once spoken of a spirit that delighted in moving wealth from one place to another. Pei Qian had begun to suspect that she herself might be the human incarnation of that benevolent spirit. Jinsu had not expected to meet a child, so she had brought no New Year money. Aunt Gui, however, came prepared. She produced an exquisitely stitched perfume sachet. Wisps of white spiritual energy drifted from it. Green light flickered faintly within, and a pure fragrance spread through the hall. Chen Ping'an immediately guessed that the sachet likely contained a bonded osmanthus leaf from the ancestral tree of Osmanthus Island. He refused at once. Pei Qian had grown observant enough to read his intention, so she shook her head and refused as well. Aunt Gui insisted that it was merely a first meeting gift. After several exchanges, Chen Ping'an could only relent and allow Pei Qian to accept it, though the sachet would naturally remain in his custody for safekeeping. Pei Qian received it with both hands, bowed deeply, and offered Aunt Gui wishes of health and eternal youth. Aunt Gui was delighted by the little girl's flawless etiquette. She patted Pei Qian's head and mentioned that Chen Ping'an already owned a courtyard on Osmanthus Island. Then, with the ease of someone giving away a simple trinket, she offered Pei Qian a vacant courtyard on the ship called Toad Palace. Qian froze. A whole house had just been placed before her. For a moment, she wondered whether every older woman beneath the heavens was born with boundless generosity. Aunt Gui, she cannot accept this. It is far too valuable.
I am giving the courtyard to Pei Qian? What does that have to do with you?
Chen Ping'an cleared his throat. His voice immediately took on the stern authority of a master. Pei Qian. Pei Qian straightened like a spear.
A master for a day is a father for a lifetime. A master's command cannot be disobeyed, otherwise I would betray both loyalty and filial piety.
Did you teach her to say that?
She must have learned it herself from the books I make her transcribe every day.
It is all because Master taught me so well.
Her reward was a knock on the head. Pei Qian clutched her forehead, confused and indignant, unable to understand which part of her praise had gone wrong. The exchange was light-hearted, but it also showed the shape of their bond. Chen Ping'an was teaching Pei Qian boundaries, gratitude, and restraint. Pei Qian, meanwhile, was learning how to survive beneath those rules with shameless speed. Their master-disciple relationship was still new. It already carried the warmth of family. After escorting Aunt Gui and the others out of the alley, Chen Ping'an walked beside Ma Ji. He asked about nurturing swords, refining swords, and the subtle distinctions between the two, Maji answered without reservation, passing on what experience he could. For Chen Ping'an, every encounter with a true swordsman was an opportunity to sharpen more than technique. Sword nurturing concerned patience, intimacy, and accumulated intent. Sword refinement concerned tempering, control, and transformation. One nourished the bond, the other forged the edge. On the 9th day of the first lunar month, Old Dragon City observed an old custom. Households prepared flowers, candles, fruit, and vegetarian dishes, then prayed beneath open sky in courtyards, skywells, and street corners where no roof stood between them and the heavens. Dust Medicinal Shop had no true natives of Old Dragon City, yet Zheng Dafeng honored the ritual more seriously than most citizens. He had barely prepared for the new year itself, but on this day he personally arranged the flowers and candles, washed the fruit, and cooked several vegetarian dishes. In the backyard skywell, he raised 3 incense tables of different heights. He lit 3 sticks of incense, knelt 3 times, and kowtowed 9 times. The ceremony was less elaborate than an emperor's worship of heaven, yet far beyond what ordinary families were expected to perform. The Zhao clan Yin Soul treated the ritual with equal solemnity. Though he offered no incense, he knelt and kowtowed beside Zheng Dafeng without the slightest carelessness. Pei Chen watched with bright curiosity. Chen Ping'an looked only once before turning away. Zheng Dafeng had made no attempt to conceal the scene, but Chen Ping'an understood that the ritual touched upon secrets belonging to Zhang Dafeng and the Yin Soul. Respect was not only shown by asking the right questions. Sometimes it was shown by refusing to look too closely. Chen Ping'an's restraint protected the dignity of others, and that restraint was one of the quiet pillars of his character. That day, Chen Ping'an continued serving as the temporary shopkeeper and accountant. His preparations for refining the water seal were complete, and soon he would be able to ascend once more into the sea of clouds. He was also eager to see which pseudo-celestial tool Fu Qi intended to offer. The debt behind that compensation was not small. Du Mao and Parasol Leaf Sect had dragged the emperor of the Great Li Empire into the conflict. The emperor had no desire to turn Chen Ping'an or Zheng Dafeng into enemies, but he had clearly underestimated the price required when an ascent tier cultivator broke the rules and abandoned the protection of his sect. Therefore, regardless of how many gold essence copper coins the Great Li Emperor offered, Chen Ping'an felt no guilt in demanding more. This was not greed, it was an accounting of consequence. When great figures violated rules, smaller people were often expected to endure the damage in silence. Chen Ping'an refused that arrangement. Compensation had to reflect the true danger, not merely the generosity of the one paying. Long ago, Zheng Dafeng had given Chen Ping'an a pouch of gold essence copper coins. Those coins had already been completely devoured by the golden sweet wine robe. At the center of the robe, the jewel held in the mouth of the embroidered golden dragon now overflowed with spiritual energy. The robe had not only returned to pristine condition, its quality had clearly risen beyond its former state. According to the Zhao clan Yin Soul, if Chen Ping'an continued feeding it gold essence copper coins, the robe would eventually become a pseudo-celestial tool. Yet Chen Ping'an hesitated. Gold essence copper coins were exceedingly rare, and Zhang Dafeng had warned him that once he entered the 3 mind tempering tiers, immortal artifacts would become less useful. If relied upon too heavily, they might even become chains that hindered his martial path. A martial artist ultimately had to temper the body, breath, fist, intent, and mind until the self became the weapon. External treasures could save a life, but they could also weaken resolve if they became the first answer to every danger. Chen Ping'an's reluctance showed that he was already thinking beyond immediate power and toward the purity of his future path. On the 11th day of the first month, Old Dragon City observed another custom. No stone tools were to be used. Mills, mortars, pestles, and similar implements all remained untouched. By then, Pei-chan had begun completing her daily transcriptions early, instead of delaying until bedtime. Chen Ping'an's supervision had gradually forced discipline into her habits. While copying a passage, Pei-chan suddenly raised a question. The book said that one should not eat fish or kill birds in spring. Did that mean no one should go fishing during that season? Chen Ping'an did not answer immediately. He told her to finish the transcription first. Only after the final character had been written did he begin explaining. The saying is meant to encourage kindness toward the world around us. Spring is when many fish carry eggs and many birds care for their young. Sparing them protects both present life and the generations that follow. But a principle cannot be separated from the circumstances of the person following it. Someone who has enough food may choose not to fish or hunt. A starving person who catches fish or birds to survive should not be condemned by those who have never feared an empty stomach. Only after learning sympathy for other people can one truly speak of compassion for all things beneath heaven. Books contain wisdom, but even wisdom has conditions. Pei-chan nodded solemnly and claimed that she understood. It is fine if you do not understand yet. Remember what I said and try to understand it later.
I lied just now. I did not understand any of it.
Her honesty earned her another knock on the head. Chen Ping'an's lesson reached far beyond fishing. He was teaching Pei-chan that morality without empathy could become cruelty. Rules made for the comfortable should not be used as whips against the desperate. This distinction between righteousness and self-righteousness would matter greatly in any child raised within the martial world. Peace continued to settle over Dust Medicinal Shop. In the courtyard, Chen Ping'an practiced his 6-step walking meditation while Pei-chan watched nearby. Without warning, he stopped. He brought Pei-chan into the shop and asked the Zhao clan Yin soul to seal off an isolated small world around them. Only then did Chen Ping'an begin teaching her the 18 stops technique. He explained the mantra, the route of qi circulation, and the changing pace between each stop. Then he unfolded a diagram of the human body, every acupoint clearly marked, and pointed out the relevant locations one by one. This was not the ordinary 18 stops technique. It was the version altered and refined by Liang. Among the younger generation of sword cultivators at the Sword Qi Great Wall, only a small circle, including Ning Yao, had learned this version. Pei-chan's body was not suited to enduring the brutal strain of ordinary martial arts training. The 18 stops technique placed less pressure on flesh and bone, relying instead on aptitude in the sword Tao. Chen Ping'an therefore offered it to her without expectation, leaving the result to fate and talent. This choice showed Chen Ping'an's care as a master. He did not force Pei-chan onto the path he himself walked. He searched for a method suited to her body and nature. A poor master teaches only what he knows. A true master considers what the disciple can bear. Pei-chan's memory was even stronger than Chen Ping'an's, a fact the 4-picture scroll martial artist had recognized long ago. Chen Ping'an demonstrated the technique only twice before handing her the diagram and sending her away to study alone. At dusk, Pei-chan returned with guilt written across her face. She declared that she was not suited for cultivation after all. After practicing for so long, she had only managed to guide the sword Qi to the 3rd stop and could not advance further. Chen Ping'an stared at her, then knocked her on the head. Do not reach for the sky before you have planted your feet. Learn one step at a time. Pei-chan answered obediently and rushed back to her room to continue what she privately called playing with fire. The tiny current of fiery sword chi already obeyed her completely. She could send it racing through acupoints and meridians at will. It could not yet reach the fourth stop, but Pei Qian did not become frustrated. She simply redirected it toward other acupoints and continued experimenting. She had no idea that her master was standing elsewhere, quietly crushed by comparison. Reaching the third stop in a single day was not failure, it was monstrous aptitude. Chen Ping'an's own path had been built through pain, repetition, and stubborn endurance. Pei Qian's progress revealed an instinctive affinity that could not be taught. The comedy of the moment concealed a startling possibility. This little girl might possess a sword path far stranger than anyone expected. Later that same day, Dust Medicinal Shop welcomed a rare guest, Huang Ting of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. The moment she arrived, she saw the old man squatting at the entrance, casually cracking sunflower seeds between his teeth. Huang Ting stopped, as though struck by lightning. The old man blinked rapidly at her, warning her without words not to expose him. Huang Ting could only pretend that they had never met, even as her thoughts erupted in disbelief. In seniority, the old man stood even above the old heavenly lord of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. Across Parasol Leaf Continent, only Du Mao could once have compared with him. But Du Mao had fallen. His great Tao had collapsed, and whether even his soul remained was uncertain. That left this sunflower seed-eating old man as the most powerful cultivator on Parasol Leaf Continent. Jade Tablet Sect had done nothing, yet the title of foremost sect on the continent had dropped into its hands. As sect leader, the old man's status had risen with it. Huang Ting could only conclude that he was absurdly fortunate. The contrast was almost ridiculous. A figure capable of standing at the summit of an entire continent was crouched outside a medicinal shop eating sunflower seeds. Yet this was precisely the danger of the place. Dust Medicinal Shop looked ordinary only to those who judged power by appearances. Huang Ting's opinion of the old man had always been neutral. Their temperaments were too different for affection or hatred to take root. She was a sword cultivator who moved directly. He was a man who could bury mountains of meaning beneath a casual posture. Chen Ping'an was surprised to see her. Huang Ting, as always, wasted no time circling around her purpose.
I followed the clues and my intuition into an ancient underground palace, hidden deep within an earth vein. I found the dragon-locking platform there, but the treacherous old ape was gone. It was as though he had vanished from Majestic World. Then our sect leader sent me a flying sword letter and ordered me to stop searching. I returned at once. Not long afterward, we received the Ancestral Hall Jade Tablet you sent. Our sect leader, Great Subduing Academy, and a naturalist cultivator examined the matter together. They concluded the disaster in central Parasol Leaf Continent was caused by the nascent tier cultivator of Peace and Tranquility Mountain, who died while carrying the hibiscus Dao hat. Our sect is deeply ashamed. The sect leader could not bring himself to face you, so he sent me to Old Dragon City before you departed. I came for one reason: to offer our apology. We suffered catastrophic losses and have little wealth left. The sect leader wanted to compensate you, but I persuaded him not to. Blame me if you must, but do not think Peace and Tranquility Mountain is naturally stingy. Under ordinary circumstances, we would never act this way.
A trace of bitterness entered Huang Ting's smile.
Our casualties were severe. We have spent this entire period hunting the demonic beings released from the well prison.
I can imagine. Chen Ping'an's reply was brief but heavy. He had seen enough disaster to understand what those words concealed. Ruined mountains, dead disciples, broken inheritances, and survivors too exhausted to mourn properly. Huang Ting's apology carried no treasure, yet it carried responsibility. Peace and Tranquility Mountain did not deny the connection, shift blame, or pretend innocence. In the martial world, where sex often protected reputation more fiercely than human life, such honesty had real value. Then Huang Ting's expression brightened with sudden satisfaction.
Honestly, Peace and Tranquility Mountain should still count itself fortunate compared with Parasol Leaf Sect. They somehow provoked an almighty sword immortal who cut Du Mao down during his attempted ascension. Not long afterward, a 10th-tier martial artist charged from the foot of their ancestral mountain all the way to the summit and shattered their ancestral hall. He only bothered avoiding attacks from a few unpolished Jade-tier cultivators. Every other technique struck his body and bounced away without leaving a mark. I enjoyed every moment of it. Zhang Shangzhen was even happier. He arranged for a ship to hover above Parasol Leaf Sect and held a celebratory banquet while watching the 10th-tier martial artist climb the mountain.
Chen Ping'an hurriedly raised his wine gourd and took a deep drink, using the wine to suppress his astonishment. Nearby, Zhang Feng, Julian, and the old man stole repeated glances at Huang Ting. Even in a gathering that had seen Zuo You, Fan Junmao, and Jin Su, Huang Ting's beauty stood above them all. The destruction of Parasol Leaf Sect's ancestral hall was more than revenge. An ancestral hall represented lineage, legitimacy, and the face of a sect. Smashing it while most attacks could not even pierce skin transformed a personal assault into a public judgment upon the entire sect. Zhang Shangzhen's banquet merely ensured that no one could pretend not to understand the humiliation. Chen Ping'an asked about Huang Ting's next destination. She replied that she had originally intended to explore Middle Earth Divine Continent, but her sect leader had forbidden it with such desperation that he threatened to hang himself if she disobeyed. He allowed her only two choices, Eastern Treasured Vial Continent or Northern Complete Reed Continent.
Eastern Treasured Vial Continent is too small for me.
Northern Complete Reed Continent, by contrast, overflowed with swordsmen. To Huang Ting, that meant endless opponents, sharper pressure, and a road on which her sword could continue growing.
I may even break through to the unpolished Jade tier there. I refuse to let Wei Jin make every sword cultivator of Parasol Leaf Continent look inferior.
Huang Ting did not seek safety, wealth, or comfort. She sought a continent crowded with stronger swords. For a true sword cultivator, danger was not merely an obstacle, it was a whetstone. Her pride toward Wei Jin was not empty jealousy, but the refusal to let one person carry the entire reputation of their homeland's sword Dao. Once the conversation ended, Huang Ting prepared to leave immediately. Delay had never suited her nature. Before departing, she noticed Pei Qian practicing swordsmanship in the courtyard. Peace and Tranquility Mountain still owed Chen Ping'an an enormous favor, and when Huang Ting learned that Pei Qian was his first ever disciple, she offered to teach the girl the fastest sword and saber techniques on Parasol Leaf Continent.
Will it hurt?
Huang Ting burst into laughter and assured her that it would not. Pei Qian looked toward Chen Ping'an for permission. He smiled and nodded. Thus, Huang Ting remained for one additional day. She taught Pei Qian the white ape sword carrying technique and the white ape saber wielding technique. Before leaving, Huang Ting patted Pei Qian's head, squeezed her cheek, and examined her with a sorrowful shake of the head.
You are such a clever girl. What a pity that looking at you is so depressing.
The words struck Pei Qian harder than any saber technique. She remained miserable for the entire day. Even after pressing a yellow paper talisman onto her own forehead, she could not drive away the gloom. Huang Ting had given Pei Qian 2 swift martial inheritances and 1 devastating wound to her pride. Yet the scene also hinted at how unusual Pei Qian's path was becoming. Within days, She had received Liang's refined 18 stops technique and Huang Ting's white ape sword and saber arts. Few first disciples in the world began with such a collection of opportunities. Watching Pei Chen sulk beneath the yellow talisman, Chen Ping'an suddenly thought of another little girl, Li Baoping. At Mountain Cliff Academy, nearly everyone regarded Li Baoping as strange. Each day, she raced from place to place with a small bamboo bookcase on her back, restless as a cat crossing hot tiles. She attended class alone and left alone. One moment she would be climbing a tree, the next scaling a hill, or scrambling onto a building. At other times, she crouched beside the lake and stared blankly at the fish gliding through the water. Whenever an opportunity appeared, she slipped out of the academy and wandered without purpose through the streets and alleys of the capital. No matter where she went, she traveled by herself. To those watching from a distance, her small figure seemed lonely. Yet Li Baoping was never rude. Whenever she encountered one of the academy's teachers, she stopped abruptly, bowed with complete respect, offered a greeting, and then shot away again like a gust of red wind. At first, the teachers would stop and prepare to answer. By the time they opened their mouths, she was already far away. Eventually, they became accustomed to it. They simply smiled, shook their heads, and accepted the greeting without trying to catch her. Li Baoping herself believed life at Mountain Cliff Academy was not bad. She rarely saw Li Huai or Lin Shouyi. The same was true of Yulu and Xixie. Even when they crossed paths, there was little to say. Once such distance might have troubled her. After her conversation with Kui Dongshan on the branch at the mountain summit, she no longer held it so tightly in her heart. The others might no longer miss Chen Ping'an very much. That did not matter. Li Baoping would simply miss him enough for all of them. That thought captured Li Baoping's stubborn tenderness. She never demanded that others feel exactly as she did. Instead, she quietly carried the missing portion herself. Her loneliness was not weakness. It was the price of a loyalty too large for her small figure. Day followed day, and the first month neared its end. On the Lantern Festival, red lanterns filled the academy with warm light. Beneath that sea of crimson, Li Baoping began to miss her father, her mother, her grandfather, her brothers, and the home she had left behind. She also missed her junior uncle. It had been a very long time since Chen Ping'an had sent a letter to Mountain Cliff Academy. For Li Baoping, that silence made the festival lights seem just a little dimmer. And so, while Chen Ping'an stood far away in Old Dragon City, guiding Pei Qian beneath the shadow of gathering continental storms, another child waited beneath red lanterns for a few lines of his handwriting. The martial world was moving toward war. Sects were rising and falling, and great cultivators were overturning mountains. But sometimes the heaviest consequence of distance was simply a letter that had not arrived. The 15th day of the first month had arrived, the Lantern Festival. Across Old Dragon City, crimson lanterns burned beneath every roof. Crowds flooded the streets and alleys, their laughter rising with the music of drums, gongs, and festival pipes. Following an ancient city custom, each of the 5 great clans had fashioned an immense dragon from lanterns. The 5 blazing creatures wound through separate routes, their luminous bodies surging above the sea of people. Seen from the clouds, Old Dragon City appeared to have awakened from its slumber, with 5 dragons of fire roaming through its veins. Chen Ping'an allowed Pei Qian to join the celebration, but he did not let her wander unprotected. The 4 martial artists from the picture scroll accompanied her openly, while the Zhao clan Yin Soul followed unseen, guarding against the slightest mishap. Even during a night of celebration, Chen Ping'an remained cautious. To him, protection was never a grand declaration. It was arranging every safeguard before danger had a chance to reveal itself. He remained inside Dust Medicinal Shop with Zheng Dafeng. A flagon of wine rested on the counter beside 2 small porcelain cups and several simple dishes. Yet before drinking, Zheng Dafeng performed a peculiar ritual. He leaned a willow branch against the shop doors, then placed a bowl and a pair of chopsticks outside the threshold. Is that an offering for the gods or for wandering spirits passing through? Zhang Dafeng glanced toward the offering, a faint smile appearing on his face.
It is a custom passed down by the old man. He never explained its meaning, and we disciples never asked. He gave the instruction, so we followed it. Besides, there are no wandering spirits or demonic entities bold enough to cause trouble in Old Dragon City. There are too many qi refiners here. The city's yang energy burns like a furnace. Even if a lost spirit drifted nearby, it would never approach this shop while Old Man Zhao remained here. Unless it had completely lost its mind, of course. Most spirits understand manners and rules far better than living people do.
Chen Ping'an nodded and took a sip of the osmanthus wine delivered by the Fan clan. The fragrance was gentle, but his next words carried the weight of departure. Tomorrow, I plan to visit Fan Junmao and ask her to help me refine my first bonded item upon the Sea of Clouds. If the refinement succeeds, I will leave Old Dragon City and travel north. The scholarly sage told me that I can travel wherever I please from this point onward, but after considering everything, I do not have any urgent matters to resolve. I will follow Senior Yang's instructions and avoid returning to Dragon Spring Prefecture for now. I intend to visit 3 or 4 places across Eastern Treasured Vial Continent. The journey should take a little over a year. By the time it ends, the moment for me to return home should have arrived. This was no aimless wandering. Chen Ping'an was preparing his bonded item, tempering himself through travel, and deliberately allowing time to reshape the situation awaiting him in Dragon Spring Prefecture. Leaning against the counter, Zhang Dafeng gazed toward the brightly lit alley.
Have you ever thought about founding your own sect in Dragon Spring Prefecture?
Chen Ping'an shook his head without hesitation. Just watching Master Ruan has shown me how troublesome it is to establish a sect. More importantly, what qualifications do I have to found one? Zhang Dafeng savored a tiny mouthful of wine. It was barely enough to wet his lips, yet his expression was as content as that of a man who had emptied several jars of legendary brew.
Suppose we reclaimed the mountains west of Dragon Spring Prefecture one by one. If we gathered around a dozen connected peaks, the spiritual foundation would be sufficient to support an immortal sect. But making the current powers surrender those mountains will not be easy. The Great Li Empire sold them cheaply only because it needed to appease the immortal factions in the region. Without your connection to Ruanqiang, you could never have purchased True Jewel Mountain, let alone Downtrodden Mountain.
Chen Ping'an listened carefully and nodded. Jewel Small World had never been celebrated for overwhelming spiritual energy. Even so, for an ordinary golden core or nascent tier cultivator, owning Downtrodden Mountain and building an immortal abode upon it would be a dream beyond price. Chen Ping'an's denial concealed a quiet ambition. He already imagined what kind of people might belong to his future sect and what principles it should possess. A man who truly had no such dream would never have asked the old Heavenly Lord of Peace and Tranquility Mountain about the cost of a mountain protection formation. Jianghu had once told him how that Heavenly Lord revealed his golden Tao manifestation and pursued the sword-bearing white ape carrying the radiant moon mirror and 3 swords. That towering image had taken root in Chen Ping'an's heart. Someday, he too wished to stand at such heights. Without warning, an elderly man appeared at the entrance of Dust Medicinal Shop. He was the expert known as Footlong Spear. He strode inside with a smile, as though he had arrived merely to share a cup of wine. Yet his eyes carried a purpose.
It seems you will be leaving Old Dragon City soon, Chen Ping'an. Before you depart, there is something I would like to discuss with you.
Chen Ping'an rose, placing his cup and chopsticks aside. Please speak, Senior. The old man gestured for him to continue eating, then approached the counter and casually stole several fried peanuts. After a moment of silence, his smile became slightly awkward.
My request may be unreasonable. It may even offend you, but when destiny places an opportunity before a person, ignoring it can become a lifelong regret. Once we separate, we may never meet again. There is no graceful way to say what I must say, so I will be direct. Brother Chen, Brother Dafeng, I only ask that you do not throw me out after hearing my proposal. These past few days I have truly come to treasure the friendships formed here. It would be a terrible pity if...
Spit it out already. Keep circling the matter and I will fall asleep before you reach the point.
The old man calmly placed a piece of lotus root into his mouth and chewed before answering.
Zuo You may already be considered a lesser grandmaster among martial artists, but the bottlenecks ahead of her are too severe. In my judgment, the 8th tier will be her absolute limit.
Zhang Dafeng's expression darkened at once. Rage erupted from him like a furnace struck by a hammer.
Only the 8th tier? Do you even understand what you just said, you old bastard? Go outside and repeat that. Every Earth Immortal in Old Dragon City will rush over and slap you into the next life.
The old man remained perfectly composed, his mild smile untouched by Zhang Dafeng's fury.
For most people, reaching the 8th tier would be a blessing granted by the heavens, but Zuo You should never have walked the martial path in the first place.
What did you say?
Zhang Dafeng's fist crashed onto the counter, rattling the cups and dishes. The old man immediately bent down, rescued Chen Ping'an's wine cup, and filled it for himself.
My apologies. That was too blunt. I shall drink 3 cups as punishment.
He emptied the first cup and reached eagerly for the flagon, but Chen Ping'an caught it before he could pour again. 1 cup is enough, Senior. We are all friends here. There is no need to cling so tightly to formalities. The old man reluctantly lowered the cup and wiped his mouth.
What excellent wine. Unfortunately, its flavor is rather delicate. One would need several more cups to appreciate its full depth.
Get to the point.
The old man's playful expression gradually faded.
Zuo You is an extraordinarily rare sword prodigy. She possesses the aptitude to become a sword immortal, but her greatest treasure is the purity of her sword heart. With proper guidance, she has a strong chance of overcoming the upper 5 tiers threshold and becoming a nascent tier swordsman. Brother Chen, allow her to leave with me and enter my sect. Within 100 years, 120 at most, I will forge her into a formidable nascent tier swordsman. After that, I guarantee she will require no more than another century to reach the unpolished jade tier.
This was not a casual promise. A nascent tier swordsman already possessed terrifying offensive power, while an unpolished jade tier sword cultivator could stand among the true giants of the cultivation world. The old man was offering Zuo You a road far higher than the 8th tier of martial arts. Chen Ping'an did not answer. He merely smiled, passed the old man a pair of chopsticks, and poured him another cup of wine. Zhang Dafeng stared at the old man with undisguised contempt.
You are playing with fire, old pervert. Aren't you afraid the flames will consume you? Zuo You is already at the Vajrabadi tier. Reaching the far-roaming tier will not be especially difficult. She merely needs time to temper her body. Yet you want her to abandon her martial cultivation, disperse her true chi, and gamble everything on some promise that she may become an upper 5 tier swordsman after 1 or 2 centuries?
Zhang Dafeng had struck the heart of the problem. Changing paths was not as simple as exchanging one technique for another. Zuo Yu's martial foundation had already entered the three mind-tempering tiers, where true qi, flesh, and will were deeply intertwined. Dispersing that power could destroy her before her sword talent ever had a chance to bloom.
I warned you that my request was unreasonable. But allowing someone with her aptitude to spend an entire lifetime on the martial path would be an unforgivable waste. Had I never met her, I could have ignored it. Now that I have seen her, how could I remain silent? And consider this, Zuo You is such a beautiful young woman. Even if she becomes an 8th-tier martial artist, she will still have to fight others with fists and physical force. What an appalling sight that would be. Would it not be far more graceful for her to soar upon a flying sword and strike down her enemies from the heavens?
You speak as though it were effortless. The stronger a pure martial artist becomes, the more dangerous it is to relinquish their true qi. For someone already within the three mind-tempering tiers, the smallest mistake can cost her life. What use is her sword aptitude if she dies before drawing a sword? Are you an ascension tier cultivator? An immortal tier expert? Why should Chen Ping'an hand such a beautiful maidservant to a lazy old pervert like you?
The old man straightened his back, suddenly wearing an expression of grave dignity.
We appreciate beauty. We are not perverts. Outsiders often fail to understand this crucial distinction. Brother Dafeng, insult me as you please, but do not demean all honorable admirers of beauty.
Zhang Dafeng raised a thumb in immediate approval.
Well said. I cannot find a single flaw in that argument.
The old man lifted his cup and drained it with delight.
I knew we walked the same path, Brother Dafeng. Our first meeting may have been unpleasant, but I believe we can become the closest of friends.
Chen Ping'an slowly chewed a peanut, his gaze calm and thoughtful. The old man fell silent, not daring to disturb him. The decision belonged to Chen Ping'an. Without his consent, the old man's grand vision would remain nothing more than words spoken over wine. At last Chen Ping'an raised his eyes. The only promise I can make is that I will ask Zuo You what she thinks. The old man's eyes widened in genuine disbelief.
You are truly willing to agree to such a thing?
He immediately realized how suspicious his own surprise sounded and covered it with an embarrassed smile. Everyone understood the value of an 8th-tier martial artist, even within the mightiest mortal empires of Eastern treasured vile continent. Such an expert could influence the survival or destruction of an entire nation. Yet Chen Ping'an did not view Zuo You as property to be traded for future strength. He would not decide her path for her. His consent only meant that she would be given the choice. That simple answer reveals more about Chen Ping'an than any heroic speech could. Faced with the possible loss of a future 8th-tier protector, he still placed another person's will above his own advantage. The old man desperately wished to ask why Chen Ping'an had agreed so readily. In the end, he swallowed the question, fearing that another word might cause the young man to reconsider. When Footlong Spear rose to leave, Zhang Dafeng announced that he needed fresh air and escorted him outside. They stopped beneath the old locust tree beyond the alley. Though night had fallen, countless lanterns illuminated Old Dragon City until the streets shone almost as brightly as midday.
Why did Chen Ping'an not ask about my true identity, or what compensation I intended to offer in exchange for Zuo You?
Because he will only ask those questions after Zuo You agrees to leave with you.
The old man's smile turned self-mocking.
You and I are far too concerned with profit and loss. Chen Ping'an is a much better person than either of us.
Zhang Dafeng watched the festive crowd stream beneath the lantern light.
Good people are usually the ones who suffer losses.
The old man's expression sobered.
That is unfortunately true.
For a moment, the celebration around them seemed distant. Beneath the lanterns, two men who hid their sorrows behind jokes stood in silence.
What will you do from here, Brother Dafeng?
I am nothing but a cripple now. I will return to where I began and continue serving as a gatekeeper.
Zhang Dafeng delivered those words lightly, but the meaning was heavy. Once a powerful martial artist, he now spoke of returning to a humble gate, as though his ruined cultivation had already narrowed the remainder of his life.
Then come to my sect. I cannot promise you the heavens, but you will never lack fine wine, delicious food, or beautiful women. You already know my temperament. I will visit you often to talk, so you will never be bored.
Zhang Dafeng shook his head.
I do not wish to owe you such an enormous favor. Besides, I no longer have the heart to undertake so long a journey.
The old man patted his shoulder.
Do not be so pessimistic. No hurdle in life is truly impossible to cross.
Zhang Dafeng rolled his eyes.
You are an upper 5 tiers chi refiner who shamelessly freeloads food and wine, yet you lecture a cripple about optimism. Do you feel no embarrassment?
The old man sighed with theatrical sorrow.
I believed I had concealed my cultivation perfectly, yet you still recognized me as a glorious upper 5 tiers immortal. It seems I may hide my cultivation base, but the majestic aura surrounding me can never be suppressed.
There must be countless people in your sect waiting in line to beat you.
Not at all. When I was young, my handsome appearance made me extremely popular among my junior and senior sisters. Whenever trouble approached, they competed fiercely for the honor of helping me. As I grew older, I realized that spending every day surrounded by women was improper, so I devoted myself to cultivation and advanced with astonishing speed. The sect elders came to value me greatly and protected me at every turn. Now that I am old, I have reached the pinnacle of the cultivation world. No one is capable of laying a hand on me anymore.
Zhang Dafeng patted the old man's shoulder as though comforting a hopeless case.
You are fortunate you did not grow up in my hometown. Otherwise, someone would have beaten humility into you long ago.
The old man merely smiled. His thoughts had already returned to Zuo You.
If she truly agrees to enter my sect, I must carefully choose an appropriate welcome gift. I must also decide what to give Chen Ping'an in return for his willingness to let her go.
Why not give Zuo You a celestial tool?
The old man laughed and immediately rejected the suggestion.
Impossible. I would never give away something so precious before she reaches at least the unpolished jade tier. Even then, she would have to promise to protect my sect for no fewer than 300 years. Without such a condition, I could never bear to part with a treasure of that caliber.
For all his shameless jokes, the old man was no fool. He could envision Zuo You reaching the summit of sword cultivation, but every celestial treasure, every inheritance, and every promise still carried a price. Her choice had not yet been made, yet the threads of fate were already tightening around her future.